Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Meet the Builders panel series. We have had a lot of panels over the past couple of weeks, and so we know that there's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot going on at our institutions, and so several of us are going back to our institutions, having move-in, juggling returning to classes, and then, of course, juggling a pandemic, a hurricane in some parts of our nation, and then, of course, still the murder and harm of Black people in our country. And so we recognize that that is a really lot of things to bring to the table. And so we appreciate you tuning in and learning with us and joining with us. We've had some great panels over the past couple of weeks, so we're really excited to get into this week's panel, which is all about advocacy. What is it? How do we do it? How do we amplify voices of those who are sometimes marginalized? How do we integrate anti-racist and inclusive strategies? So we've got a rock star panel that I'm going to let them introduce themselves. My name is Pearson. I serve as the Assistant Director for New Student and Family Programs at Florida State University. And I will let you all introduce yourself in addition to just saying who you are and what work that you do. Maybe share a digital community that is like really pouring into you right now or is really engaged. I know for me, it sounds really ridiculous, but I love the Strong Black Lead Netflix account. I don't know who runs it, but they do a fantastic job. And with all the great new Black TV shows on Netflix, it's been really nice to like see folks engage in those. And so that's something that I probably spend too much time looking into. But tell us who you are, what you do, and then what's a digital community that is really pouring into you.
Is it like an order?
You got it.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Erica Blake. I'm currently a community director at Georgetown University. I also, on the side, have an Instagram account called Black at BWI, where I talk to Black students, faculty, and staff about their experience at predominantly white institutions. Right now, I'm really listening to Okay Now Listen, which is a podcast with Sylvia and Scotty Beam, and it's just full of like Black girl magic and just everything that I need as a young Black woman right now. So if you don't listen to podcasts, that's a really good podcast to start with. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right, so I guess I'll start. My name is Taquanda Johnson. I passionately known as T. Marie on all outlets. I serve as the social media strategist at Eastern Michigan University here in Ypsilanti, Michigan. And along with managing the accounts as well as the strategy for social, I also oversee as liaison for all of our social leadership across campus. So that means all of the colleges as well as departments. And I'm excited to be here. I would have to say one of the outlets that's really pouring into me is one, the overall higher ed comm community. They've been great, but then also I'm a little biased, but our Blacks in Higher Ed comm group on Facebook that myself as well as Jamila started a couple of months ago. It's been phenomenal being able to receive as well as pour into other African Americans who are working in the area of higher ed comm.
I'm Jamila Walker. I'm the University Social Media Manager at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia. So I manage the university accounts and also help out other colleges and departments in developing the strategies and campaigns for, brand awareness about our university. And the digital community space that I like is with Taquanda is our Black in Higher Ed, shameless plug there. I love that group. I'm glad that we came together and started that just for like a group for us, just kind of talk and, lean on each other and give advice. And then I know you said one, but I just have another one, which is for Colored Girls Book Club. I'm an avid reader when I have the time. So that group in itself they have an Instagram group. So I just love being a part of that group and kind of reading along with their book of the month.
Love that. Well, we've got all of the great resources. I know I'm going to go follow some of those. And we've got the Black Girl Magic really represented well in this space today. So I'm so excited to hear from all of you. So start us off of what does digital community building mean to you? So that's kind of the focus of our group. And so what does that mean? Because I know it can mean so many different things to a lot of people. And whoever goes first just goes first, and we'll just flow that way.
I'll go.
We're all like, okay, which one?
Because our screen, it looks different on my screen.
Right.
You got it.
I'll go, sure. So digital community for me means having a platform where people can kind of express themselves and communicate, and giving them that platform to do that in a respectful way and to kind of generate that conversation. So that's kind of what, when I'm thinking about our social media platform at ODU, is giving that space, but also making sure that people are being respectful, following our social media policy, and, you know, given the times of the shooting and all the injustice and, you know, dealing with the racism and stuff like that, you know, because we're a public institution, there's but so many things that we can hide. So just keeping that in mind, but also providing content that kind of engages too with our audience, not always necessarily with you know, anti-racism, but, you know, kind of giving them some questions and stuff like that. So just kind of giving that platform of communication and kind of networking, kind of building those relationships.
I want to like tag off of Jamila. Like, I think the big thing for digital community for me is having not just that space, but also that opportunity to be authentic and displaying your culture. So whatever that is, like, that's one of the things that here at Eastern that I always say is that, you know, being online or creating community online is all about displaying one's culture in whatever form that might be. Again, displaying culture, but then also being authentic in just that, in that space.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of you too, actually, that's super important to me too. So as we have this responsibility to build these platforms for our students and just everyone that is interacting with us, it's the ability to definitely show up as your full self, be authentic in that, but then making sure that we are providing the resources for students to actually show up as their full selves. Because if they don't have the certain things that other students have, then they're not going to feel comfortable coming into those spaces and being themselves. So while we're building these digital platforms and communities, we also have to think about what these students need and how we can meet them there too. So definitely just a combination of what you all said, but for sure.
Absolutely, y'all are great. On that same note of like what folks are needing, what do they need? What is advocacy, and how are we meeting those needs for our students or staff or faculty?
I think, like, in order for us to even talk about meeting the needs, we have to be in a position to listen so that we can meet the needs.
I saw that coming. That's
and I think that's like really huge, at least for us being in a digital space. Like, everybody you know, shares on their social, like, what is important to them or what's in their soul, you know, and all of that literally will come out. So I think first and foremost, before we can meet the need, we need to know what the need is, right? And that comes from being in a space where we can actually listen and listen with an open mind, an open heart, you know, and also honestly, sometimes being able to scale back what we might feel in that space in order to meet that need.
Yeah, definitely that too. And it's important because we have all of these things happening now where the university is like, oh, we're going to release the statement and we're going to do all of these things and we're going to listen and we're going to hold these spaces to listen. But then again too, like, it's that action behind the listening, and you have to be willing to advocate. You have to be willing to let go of like whatever privilege you have within that system, because we all have certain type of privileges within the system depending on whatever intersecting identities that we have and what other people might not have. So being able to listen, take that and actually move from it and do something with it, because I know for me, literally sick of, I have so many meetings on my calendar where we're talking about how we're going to be anti-racist in the workplace and all of these things, but there's no action behind it. And I literally had to call out my department last week. So I'm just like, yo, why are we doing this? What is the point of continuously ripping off this Band-Aid and talking about how I'm not being represented and how I'm facing these microaggressions if you're not going to actually do anything? So definitely with advocacy, you have to be willing to understand your biases and how you're willing to give up certain rights that you have within that system. That was cool with your lights. I know you did it on purpose, but
I was just like, oh my God. Yeah.
It's all good.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. Because I'm like, I can't control it. Like, I literally can't.
It gave a mood.
It did.
Sometimes mine do that if I like sit too still. It's like, oh, no one's in here, so I'm just gonna shut off the lights.
Right.
I think it's both what Erica and Taquana said, advocacy, speaking out, in support of a cause or organization. And when the killing of George Floyd happened, that was a huge elephant in the room at my school. And ODU is considered an MSI, which is a minority serving institution. So there was the pressure that we have to say something, and not just say something, and what are we going to do after that? And our president sent a letter only on social. He didn't post it anywhere else. He just wanted to post it on social media. And I posted it, and I was just ready to see what the backlash was going to be, what the comments were going to be like, because it hits different when you're a Black woman and you're a social media manager, because I'm seeing these comments firsthand. No one else is seeing it like I'm seeing it. But surprisingly, it was met with so much support that's kind of what I needed at that time, because I'm feeling, my own anger and my own hurt. So I was happy that our president made that letter, and he's done that in the past. Like, this wasn't a first time thing. So, having that, and then our action behind it was, we had our March of Justice around our campus. Our diversity and equity inclusion, they had a plethora, my favorite word, of virtual events, of talks, for students to kind of, say what they have to say, as well as for faculty and staff. And the talks have continued in different spaces. So, and even I think last week, and I think they have something this week, of more talks and more events. So the conversation is continuous to go. And my job is also to make sure that also continues. So partnering with our libraries on different kind of books of injustice and anti-racism, just to kind of give that to our community and know that, we hear you and we're listening, and we're not going to let this die down. This isn't a trend. We're going to continue the conversation.
I appreciate that y'all both went there, because that was definitely something that I wanted to talk about. Is like, there's so many institutions that are putting out statements, they're saying things on social, they're committing to these certain things. And I think there's a two-part conversation of there are some folks who are putting out statements, and it's kind of like, okay, well, what now after the statement? What are we doing? What does advocacy look like after we do that? And then I know for me, like, I've even shared of like, oh, remember over the summer when we were like putting out all these great statements and we were like really committed to this, and then here we are again with Jacob Blake, no one's saying anything. Like, did we forget? So I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on some of the statements that a lot of institutions are making. I know that you talked about them being very well received, or are y'all seeing them be well received at other institutions, at your institution? And then what's happening afterwards? What does the advocacy look like once that statement is out there and we're doing the next step?
Yeah, so I think that I'll kind of chime in on this one. Jamila and I have been like, literally, I feel like we've been on this circuit of doing talks about this very subject. And honestly, I believe that some universities really don't know the next step of where to go after they've actually put out a statement. They don't know the action as far as, okay, do we have additional programming? How can we make a community safe space online in order to talk about these type of, things and stuff that's literally injustice that's happening each and every day. So for us at Eastern, I've made it at least my goal to ensure that we are pushing just the university stands on diversity, inclusion, and equity, like literally across the board when it comes to social, and ensuring that my social leadership has the tools that they need in order to do that too. And I think in the position that we are in, we have a lot more power than what individuals want to, take in or realize, so because let's be honest, like we show exactly how or what the university stands on. So for us, like we have shared like, hey, here's some resources continuously, but then also let's just keep it 100, is that people are still into, re-entry safety in COVID, right? So that messaging has unfortunately, overshadowed, recent killings, or injustice even in our own cities and states. So it's going to be like in a way our responsibility to speak up in order to ensure that all messaging is heard, not just re-entry, but then also social justice too.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly, that last statement, because it's easy to say, oh, now we're bringing students back, so this is more important. Mm-hmm. But yes, you're bringing students back, but a lot of these students come from the backgrounds of the people that are fighting the injustice now. So yes, you're bringing them back and you're taking them out of not necessarily the safety of their homes, but you're bringing them to a place where, like, when I think of Washington D.C., like there's so many things, especially in Georgetown, that Black and brown students face, being in such a elite community, and the microaggressions and the racism that students and even like myself face on a daily walking through the neighborhood. You can't just put a Band-Aid over that. So I that really sat with me as far as like the COVID and the re-entry stuff that's happening, because there really isn't much talk about the things that are going on now and how they put out these statements. And it's like, okay, you put these out, but what's next? And
right, unless
you're willing to break down that system, what's the point of a statement anyway? Because it really starts with the system, and I'm super big on that, because you can literally put these things out and say you want to do something, but a lot of times it's just performative, and universities have that platform to be performative, and a lot of times they're not being held accountable. So I F with that statement heavy. Like that's real. Like that's, yeah.
I appreciate it. You said like performative, because I was cruising through Facebook today, and you have the things where folks are like, well, what's been like the word of 2020? What has been like? And I'm like, it's performative. That's my word for 2020. is performative. Like that's exactly what is happening, and it's framed as like, oh well, students are coming back to campus, and that's really important. Yeah, well, while they're moving, like they're still processing. I think it's recognizing that we can process multiple things at a time. And I think that's difficult when we start talking about digital communities and strategy, is that like we all, just like humans, we have to do multiple things and process multiple things at a time.
Agree.
Absolutely.
On that note, I know that we were talking about a lot of like statements that are going out. Are any other digital communities, either on your campus or other folks that you have seen, doing more than just the statement, right? Like that is in the digital space. So I know that I've had a lot of conversations with students about like, yeah, there's a lot of statements, but there's no conversation starters. No one's like, they're not asking any questions. It's just, here's our statement. And we've checked the box. Now we're done. Has anyone seen any like conversations or any strategies that have been working outside of the statement?
Again, we put out the statement and then we immediately went into action. And at my school, we have the President's task force for diversity, and then we have the Office of Diversity and Equity, and then we also have our Office of Intercultural Relations. So, and then we have our student organizations, NAACP, SGA. So everyone coming together and continue to have that conversation and have these events has kept it moving forward. And our community, I don't know how it is at other schools, but our community especially are very vocal. They will call you out. They will call the social media out if we are not doing our job immediately. So, so to see that they're like, okay, this is why I love ODU, or this is my alma mater, and even prospective students appreciating that what we've been doing has helped us immensely. We even have, it's called Dominion Rock on our campus, and student organizations are allowed to kind of paint whatever they want on it. And then they painted Black Lives Matter. And I was able to post that, and just even having the support of my team to be able to give a voice to those who are always silenced was very important to show that. So we've gone beyond the statements. Our last statement was about Jacob Blake. That didn't go too well, surprisingly, but it was still out there, and the conversation is still continuing with resources, with virtual events, with some in-person events now that campus is open. So it hasn't died out, even with COVID and reopening happening at the same time.
Sorry, y'all.
I mean, that's good to hear. Like, I feel like a lot of universities need to take a page from that book. And a lot of times it's just a blanketed statement, and it shouldn't be. Like, I like how you all have different statements. It's not just Black Lives Matter, but you're actually talking about what's currently happening versus this whole like blanketed thing, because we've been going through this for so long, and it's not, unfortunately, it's not going to just end. So to know that it's a continuous fight versus when it happens we're going to say something fight is super dope to see. And I think a lot of universities should take a page from that. Yeah.
I most definitely agree with that. I think that because I'm just going to be honest, like, we haven't had any forums or anything like that. We did, however, have a few marches, like as of recently. Our athletic department and our athletes came together and did their own march actually a couple of days ago. So we've been sharing that on social to show that, hey, we're still taking a stand even in the midst of all of this. So that was a bold and a great move on athletics part. But as Jamila was saying is that we too have a task force, the President's Task Force on Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity. And we also have what we call our DCI department. And then we have CORE, which is our Center for Race and Ethnicity. So we do have avenues available for individuals. It's just the fact of, let's just one of the things you'll hear me say, let's just keep it real. But let's just keep it real. Like, unfortunately, some of these departments work in silos, so they're all doing their own, efforts, but they aren't coming together to pull those efforts. And I think during this time, it's really important that departments do come to pull together to push those efforts. And that's been one of my personal goals, is ensuring that the space that I sit in, that I'm doing my part to share what everybody else is doing, so that individuals know, hey, this is what's taking place on campus. We do have a place, that you can call home. There is safety, in this. Let's talk about it. So.
Well, I know a lot of you have talked just a lot about like what some of the statements are saying, and we have even gone into, I appreciate it. I think we were talking about listening to the students and really taking in. I was telling someone, I think yesterday, I was like, that used to be called lurking, is what I think it's now evolved, but I'm like, that basically is lurking is what you're doing. But when we talk about listening to our students, how do we amplify how our students are feeling? And so I know that we talked about like, yeah, the students will absolutely come for the institutional account. They will say what they need to say about their experience. And even if they're not like adding the institutional account, like they follow enough people that it gets back to the institution, the things that they are saying. And so how do we advocate for those things, but then also how do we amplify the experiences that they're having, and making sure that our digital communities and our digital spaces are showing our Black, Indigenous, people of color in those spaces, and knowing what our community actually looks like.
So I can say one of the things that I have been doing is that I allow them to be themselves, even in the midst, like I don't go hiding comments or, or deleting them off rip. Like, no, like, go ahead, say how you feel. And then I'm going to reply to it, and I think right then and there, that shows that, that the university is listening. For some students that do speak out, they'll reach out to me personally because they know that there's a Black girl behind the accounts and she cares just as much as, as I do. And I think that does make a difference when a statement is put out. Like I legit got emails and calls from alumni that said, good call on that. I know you had something to do with that statement, and rightfully so. Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. I'll just bring it up, but like, actually, I didn't have anything to do with that one. But, so I think even in the midst of listening is allowing them to be their authentic self, but then also replying to show like, hey, I am listening, even if it's something that's just like, hey, thanks so much for commenting. Go on ahead and hit us up, contact us in our direct message. We would love to talk to you a little bit more about that. Like, you don't have to necessarily hit right on what the university might stands on that, but at least being able to be in that space to say, hey, we're here and that we are taking that into account. And I think another way of showing that you're listening too, like we talked about before, is of course sharing those resources to show that you're listening, and that this isn't a one-time thing. I think at Eastern, and a big thing for us is that people think it's just a one-off, right? So one of the things that we have been actively doing is to show that this isn't a one-off situation. My statement wasn't a one-off statement, or the university statement, it wasn't a one-off statement. Like, we are legit here. We are trying to make change. And then also partnering with those students who have voices that individuals hear, right? So for instance, one of the students that is openly, very open, that's on campus, she also is a part of NAACP. So I'll grab her up and be like, hey, we need to partner concerning this. Let them know, like, look, the university really does care, and it comes different. It hits different when it's somebody else that looks like you, that's actually saying like, hey, we're trying to do our part. Just give us a little leeway, give us a little grace to see that change. And I think that kind of comes into play as partnering with those students that are very vocal, to actually show like, yeah, what, we are actually being heard. And then also I send screenshots to my bosses and say, hey, this is what individuals are saying. I hold them accountable all day long. Like, and I think that plays a factor too, because they can't say that you did not tell them, right? So they want to hear what individuals are saying. A great example of that is that somebody hit our accounts this past week with one of the buildings that we have on campus, and it turns out that it's named after somebody who apparently is racist. Yeah. So I've had to deal with that this week, right? So now a statement went out actually yesterday that said, hey, we're investigating this, and please understand that the building is named by two people. So we're investigating both. And in the event that the facts come out true, then we will be changing the name of the building. So all of that is coming out. And of course, like I heard my students today were just saying like, well, they didn't see this beforehand, or they didn't know this, they didn't know this beforehand. And I simply said, sometimes it just has to be brought to the light. Maybe they did not know, and it's unfortunate. Like, we just have to call it like it is. Sometimes they just don't know. So That's my take.
Or sometimes they think that the students are not going to bring it up again.
Right. Right.
Like at Florida State, like we removed the Epps statue and then they silently moved it back, and the students were like, no, we said no. And so I know the student that did very similar at your institution, like led an entire Twitter campaign and got folks behind it. And there's still some more buildings that they're working on and still some more places. But yeah, absolutely. And I think it's valuable to mention that like that is how some change does happen, and that is a valuable way for that to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think when I think of amplifying, also too, like I think of that representation. So as a Black queer woman working in higher ed, knowing that I try to show up as my full self everywhere. And sometimes it's definitely difficult because I'm a woman, I'm Black, and I'm queer. So that's literally the bottom of the totem pole in most places, most social structures. But knowing that if I do show up as my full self, I am helping someone. And I may not notice that, but it is helping that. So that's one of the main things when I think about that amplifying, because growing up, I didn't necessarily have the representation. So, that could have helped me be stronger and understanding like myself and the inner battles that I had. So also too, like with my project Black at PWI, when I'm talking to students, faculty, and staff about their experience, I'm putting it on the forefront. It's on social media, like it's on Instagram, it's on Twitter, it's on my website. And you can't really turn a blind eye to what people are experiencing when you put a face to that and their actual story, because this is their experience. And when you're reading their experience, if you had some type of impact in that where they didn't feel represented and they didn't feel like, they could thrive in these spaces, you have to now take that responsibility. Now, what universities do with that is, and institutions, that's pretty much up to them. But knowing that I'm able to share the stories of Black people is super important to me, because going to PWI for undergrad and then HBCU for grad, I really saw the difference in my development outside of the classroom. And you shouldn't have to go to an HBCU to receive that. And it's super unfortunate that PWIs really, a lot of them don't have the spaces that we need to really grow. So that's really why I started the project, and it's really helped with just a lot of, sometimes you need to get it out. And sometimes people read and just like, wow, I didn't even know that I was experiencing this. But reading this story really showed me that, I am experiencing this and I need to tackle it. And it's super important to have that representation. So that's one of the ways that I make sure that I'm amplifying, just being myself and also with that project. So thank you for that.
I think it's what Erica and Taquana have said too. Not saying that my institution is perfect, Farming is not, but I think because we are one of the youngest in Virginia, it's helped us a lot. Like, we don't have anything on campus where like a building is named after someone who's racist. So we haven't had to deal with that like UVA has or anything like that. So I think that's helped us a lot. But I know when Taquana and I have done these talks before, one of the questions have been like, okay, but how do I amplify if I don't have these resources? And my thing is, find them, do some digging. You got to get creative. When this happened with George Floyd was the start of me, okay, let me start rebuilding these relationships and networking with these departments that we have. Also going through our archive of the libraries, and I started this like Black Voices that I would do on Thursdays, just showing like, hey, here's a prominent African American from ODU, and he was this or she was that. So showing, those kind of things. And students in the community love to see themselves on social. So finding, those photos and putting a caption to it, for them to see like, okay, we are there, we are on campus. And again, because we're MSI, which they think they're HBCU, but that's a whole nother story, because I went to Hampton, but we won't go there. It's a whole nother talk. We have to carry it because that's important. And we've had the most largest African-American graduates. So, and we do have a big population of African-Americans on campus. So we owe it to them, we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our faculty and staff to amplify those voices in those ways. So again, it's just researching, finding those stories, evergreen stories. I went back into our news stories to find those and kind of post those kind of content. So yeah, it took a little digging, but it worked. And, continue to find new ways to amplify those voices too.
You know what, like, can I piggyback off of that? Like, I think that finding those voices is so important. Like, even in the midst, like, we are doing a Facebook Live series right now called Let's Talk EMU Safe. So we're dealing with the fact of, reentry and COVID safety and how you can protect yourself as well as others in the community. So one of the things that we've done is we've gone into the departments and grabbed up some of these department heads as well as like directors and such to talk a little bit about how their department is keeping safe. So I had the pleasure of interviewing our director over our Disability Resource Center, who just so happens to be Black, and he's a doctor. So I got excited because he's a really close friend of mine. And I said, we're just gonna hold a conversation. I was like, let's just get on here. I was like, and take them into our world. And we did exactly that. So that has been ways that I've like gone in and been like, hey, who do I need to pull out? Yep, I need to pull you out of your space, right? Like, I need to pull you out of your space and I need people to see you. I need folks to know that there's a doctor and he's a brother and he's running the Disability Resource Center. Like, I need to grab folks like and our students absolutely love Dr. Rima, and she's over in our Department of Education, but we've literally used her on like so many articles and so many social media features to show like social injustice when it comes to being in the Department of Education, right? And being in the schools and what that looks like and how we can evoke change in that area. And I think by going in there, like that's another way of amplifying voices. It's just going in there and grabbing out those folks, even some people who may not feel comfortable in talking because of the fact that it's one of us asking, they'll do it, right? So that's been another area that we've done that. And then also we have a blog called Blog EMU. So I allow for students as well as faculty and staff to be like guest bloggers. And that's an opportunity that we use to amplify voices as well.
These are all so good, so good. I'm loving hearing all of the stories. I worked with a student. I'm a PhD student, so I'm getting ready to write my dissertation, eventually. And one of the things that he said, I asked, and he was like, I would just love to see someone who looks like me that is living my life at my institution. So as a Black queer man, I want to see that, and that's not something that I see on our institution's social media. And so it makes me very critical of it. It makes me not necessarily feel like I belong. And I definitely think institutions need to hear those types of things and understand that, like, yeah, you've got to be able to, our students have to be able to see themselves in our social. It can't just be this announcement platform where we are only sharing, a very homogeneous group of people. I think the other thing is like our social media managers and our folks also have to be paying attention. And so at FSU, we had a former student win Miss World, which was like a really big deal. And she's a Black woman and nothing for weeks. And it really hurt our students. And to go back to like the lurking comment, I'm like, I see it, but I'm not running. But I know that if I see it,
that's not my responsibility.
But I'm like, but I also, as a Black woman, I see what I feel that same pain, because I'm like, oh, that is really cool, like that she won Miss World, and I wonder why our institution is not posting about it. And then maybe like a month later, they posted a photo of a white woman who was competing in like a local pageant. Yes, your face was our face. We were like, wait, she's competing, but like she won, and we're confused. And to your point, what I really appreciated was like they didn't respond. They just later on posted a story about Miss World, and it was like, can you like issue an apology or acknowledge that this was wrong in some way. And like, here are students, like, and this is the prime example of them saying, we don't see ourselves in your social, because she won this world. And there had to be a Twitter uproar for us to say anything. And so it's really important. And so I tell that story to ask, like, what are the mistakes that some institutions are making when it comes to advocacy?
Do we have a time? Okay.
Y'all get what I'm saying. What are the mistakes?
I mean, that was one of them.
It was.
That's definitely
How do we top that one?
Yeah, this is gonna be quick, but you can't just put black and brown students on a brochure and say we have diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge problem that I've been seeing for a very long time. You can't just say, oh, please come out to this tour, and we're giving this tour, we want you to be there representing, and it's that one black student, and we are accepting black students at higher rates, and we're doing all of these things, but once again, it's a representation and it's performative and it's trash. So like, you really have to put more behind just we have a community of black students, and I think that's a huge problem that I see. And I think, you both would have more as far as like social media and stuff, but I know like that's something that's super annoying that I see way too common.
I think it starts there, E. Like, it totally starts there, Erica, because you'll be surprised, but in our case, we didn't have enough. And so specifically, especially when it came to social, like, we didn't have enough. So when I got in a position, I flipped the script and I started showing more of a balance of the two, like literally what campus looked like. And we started getting comments from people saying like, oh man, this is great. This is the Eastern that I loved. This is the Eastern that I spent 4 or 5 years at. This is why I chose this university. And I think that first and foremost, like you mentioned, like, yeah, that's where it starts. Like, it totally starts right there in the marketing and ensuring that we are actually not just using people just for props, but we're legit sharing stories. And I think that's kind of where they fall short at, is not sharing more stories of the individuals that are being impacted, on our campuses. So I would say that's what people are doing wrong too. Is like, it's so like, oh, I just put up a, black or brown face, and we're good. And it's like, no. Like, one of the things that we're doing is, well, one of the things that I personally did, it was an event that we had, and I went and sought out, specifically in this case, 2 Black-owned businesses that were alums. I said, okay, how can I need a photo booth and I need some props. What do I call? Oh, such and such got a company. Okay, bet. So now they're a solidified vendor, like with the university. And I think that's kind of what we can do too, is, utilize those, but then also make it known, like, hey, this company is a partner with the university. And by the way, they're alums. And they don't look like you, like, and things like that or whatever. But I agree with Erica. Like, first and foremost is the marketing. And then the second one is not sharing enough stories to show like this is a product of X, Y, and Z.
I agree with both. And I think one of the mistakes is not amplifying at all. And then when it comes to like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, statement, so now it comes off kind of fake.
Yep.
And that's when the backlash comes. And there's always room for growth. There's always room for growth on that. But when you don't amplify and then boom, you try to come and amplify, it doesn't come out right at all. So from that point, and then, then you just make a blank statement and then you move on with your day, like we've been talking about. That's a huge mistake. And I think even with marketing too, prime example, like when these things were happening, the marketing team trying to help, wanted to push out this video. It just wasn't the right audience. It wasn't the right timing. And that's, again, in social media, kind of feeling the room, reading the room, feeling the temperature. And this was not the time for a marketing ad video right now. Right now was the time to amplify the voices that have always been silenced. And that wasn't it. So, but also having that support from your team to be like, yes, Jamila's right. She knows what's going on. Let's go with there, and then she'll let you know when we can kind of add more things to it, but not, downing what's going on. So yeah, I agree with the brochure having a photo stock images of two Black people on there saying diversity, you're welcome. No. And blank statements, and not moving forward with it at all too. It's, we have to do better.
I think too, like Jamila was saying, even those videos, right? So we had a situation where our faculty senate decided that they wanted to do a video that basically expressed how people were feeling concerning George Floyd and all of that. And I got an email, and the email was just like, yeah, we're going to do this. We're asking for everybody to submit their video or their photo with them sharing on a piece of paper, how they felt. Yeah, like,
that ain't it.
It came together. I felt like it was, now looking back, like, I appreciate the effort. I will say that, do I appreciate the effort? Yes. I was sad afterwards, and then I had to push it, right? Like I was sad. I was really sad. And I think where some universities fail in this area, and I'm gonna be honest, like it was a win, yet it was a fail. It was a win for Faculty Senate, but honestly, it was a fail for Black employees and Black faculty and staff, because they were still dealing with the feelings, still dealing with the emotions of all of this. So nobody submitted anything. There probably had to be about 3 Black and brown faces across all these other faces. And yeah, so I think, it was a win for them trying, the attempt. The execution became, after the after product, whatever, kind of became a fail. So I think that's kind of where institutions fall off. Like, I would rather you take time out than trying to rush and put something together. And then legit take the time out, slow down, and then put it out. That doesn't mean it's going to be evergreen content. It can be evergreen content depending on exactly how you do it, but just take your time. It doesn't have to be rushed. And I think, unfortunately, in the space that we're in, at least for PWIs, like sometimes it's just rushed because we feel like we gotta put something out, and we gotta put something out quick, because if we don't, then our Black faculty and staff and our Black students are really gonna have an uproar, right? Mm-hmm. And we don't want an uproar. We don't want issues. In our case, they don't want another march with all of the Black students on the lawn of the president's house. Like, we don't want that anymore. So, I think that by taking your time out and realizing, like, okay, we need to slow it up a little bit. Like, yeah, there is a need for this, but if that means that it's 3 days versus tomorrow, then I would rather produce something, later on than versus trying to rush it.
I think also asking too, if you don't know,
yeah,
ask. I'm not saying we're experts, we're Black, but we're Black. So maybe ask us before, but that also was a teachable moment too.
Yeah.
But I think also, like, again, going with, being creative, also finding those voices, kind of thinking you have to do the work. Like last month was National Black Business Month. That was a perfect opportunity to kind of see what's going on in your area. I promoted some of our students who are entrepreneurs. So again, it's just kind of finding those voices and doing the work. Like, don't get lazy on it.
Yeah, that's good. I wish I would have thought of that.
I was literally like, that's great.
That's because I have the national calendar, like I have it bookmarked.
Like, write that down.
Yeah, I was like, oh, it's National Black Business Month. Yes, because I'm also trying to support more Black businesses. So, oh, that was another digital community I also follow is we have a 757 Connect, which one of my good friends, she runs and kind of showcases Hampton Roads, which is our area, and kind of the Black businesses and things like organizations that are going here. And it's a really good community, and we kind of come together. We do Netflix parties. We talk about finances and stuff like that. So it's just something of our own to have.
Love that. Well, y'all, I wish we could sit here and talk forever because
I know.
for my entire week. And y'all really started to go in the direction of where I was going to go to conclude. And so thank you, because all of your voices have been incredible. I have learned so much. I know that so many folks are going to learn a lot from all of you. But to wrap us up, if you had to give a piece of advice, whether it is to just a student affairs professional, a social media manager, an institution, whoever it might be, that wants to engage in advocacy and amplifying voices in a digital community, what would be your piece of advice?
I think I'll go first. I'm sorry.
No, please.
I would say first and foremost, don't be afraid to be woke. If you are a social media, manager, or if you're, in a department, don't be afraid to be the woke person in your department. Don't be afraid to step up. And I know we get tired of educating, but in this space and in this time that we're in, I would rather educate someone than them do something blind. So I would say, be the woke individual. Don't be afraid to take a seat, take authority, and, pull up a seat at the table if needed, if there isn't a seat available, and be that voice that not just your faculty and your staff need, but your students need. Importantly, you set the example for them.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. And my motto's always been, a closed mouth don't get fed. So if you feel like in your gut that your institution isn't doing enough and you know that they're not doing enough, then speak up and say something. Find that voice, find the information. There's stories out there. You just have to do the work, and making sure that, Black voices or diversity aren't boggled down or being silenced, and that this is not a trend, and that you continue to have this conversation going.
Yeah, definitely speak up. And I'm a huge believer in there's a lane for everyone. So you don't have to be at the forefront. That doesn't mean that, you have to take on this fight by yourself. You don't have to be that person that is necessarily always leading the charge. You can always find ways to, hop on and figure out where you fit into that, because it's not for everyone to be at the front, right? You'll have to find our lane within that. And it's really pushing that agenda forward, because if we continue to recreate the wheel and not figure out what's working and build on that too, I think that also pushes our agenda back too. Because making sure you understand what that is, and also us as Black people, we know what we need. So a lot of times these conversations that we have, it's more girl, yeah, I feel that too, and we already doing that, but it's really the white people that need to be listening to this too, and trying to figure out how they can break the system, because we know what we need and we continuously say it, but people aren't listening. So I hope that white people are going to listen to this conversation too, because it's something that they need to know, because we're giving the tips and the tools and what we know, our students, and what we need too. So a lot of times when I think of self-actualization and our hierarchy of needs and all that stuff, I'm a psychology major. So when I think of those things, if we're not providing that basic need, like if we're not meeting that basic need of our students, then they're not going to find that place where they can show up as themselves. So white people, as you're listening, if you're teaching classes and if you're running departments and stuff like that, figure out what the students need. Listen, like we've said that a lot in this conversation, but you have to listen and you have to actually have that action behind that, because if you don't, the needs aren't going to be met and they're not going to be able to grow. So yeah, I'll end there.
Perfect way to end. Thank y'all so much. If you hang out, we're gonna take a picture.
Thank you.
Document this experience for myself.
Of course.
But thank y'all so much.